What if I tell you that in Python you can write your own function with just one line of code? Yeah, that's what Lambda functions are there for. And in this tutorial, we'll be covering Lambda functions in Python. With the help of Python code, we'll be studying topics like what are Lambda functions, what is its syntax, and how does it differ from other user-defined functions. As well as, we will use Lambda functions with list comprehensions and other Python functions like map, reduce, and filter. So, let's go! Let's start with the syntax of Lambda functions. Lambda functions look like the keyword lambda. Then here we will specify our input variables with a colon. Then we will specify our output expression. Let's take an example. Suppose we want to write a lambda function to return the cube of a number. So let me create a function called cube_function and I will write it as lambda. It will take the input as x and then colon. Now to return the cube of the number, I'll write the expression as this. Now to call this function, I will write it like cube function, and suppose if I want the cube of 3, then I will write 3 over here. See, it has returned 27 to us. Lambda functions help in writing very compact user-defined functions. Like let's say if we had to use normal user-defined function syntax using def and then defining the function name, we would have written something like this and then we would have returned cube 3. It takes 2 lines over here, but with lambda functions we can write one-liner functions. It's not necessary that we need to always store the lambda functions. We can also directly write them as, suppose here this is my lambda function expression where it takes the input as x and returns x cube. So I can write it in parentheses and then if I write over here let's say 3, it will return me 3 cube because it will assume that 3 is like an input to it and then it will return 3 cube. See, it has returned 27. Similarly, if as an input if I am giving it 4, so instead of 3 if I am writing it 4 over here, it will return me 4 cube. See, it is returning a 64. It is not necessary that lambda functions need only one argument x. They can also have multiple arguments. Let's take an example where our lambda function is taking multiple elements, which is let's say x and y, and then it is returning the product of those elements. We will write it as my function and then we will write it as lambda x comma y because we have got two inputs x and y and we want to multiply both the numbers. Now if we will call this my function and if I return 2 comma 3, it will assign 2 to x and 3 to y and then it will return us 6. Similarly, I can write 10 comma 2, then it will return us 20. Lambda functions can also be used with list comprehensions, but for which the syntax slightly changes. See, the syntax for list comprehensions is lambda keyword, then we write our inputs over here. After the colon, we write our if condition like value when the condition is true, if, and then the keyword if, and then where our condition is. Here we are specifying our condition, else when the value when our condition is false. Let's take an example. Suppose we have got two numbers x and y and we want to return the maximum of the two numbers. So for which let's write our function as my function lambda. Now I'll write inputs are x and y. Now what I want to return? I want to return x if x is greater than y. Otherwise, I want to return y. Here x more than y is my condition. If it is true, then it will return as x. Otherwise, it will return as y. Now let's try calling our function. My function 20 comma 30. Then see, it is returning as 30. Similarly, if we write my function 10 comma 2, then it is returning as 10. Lambda functions are majorly used with three types of functions, which is map, reduce, and filter. Let's see how lambda functions are used with map. To give you a gist, map function is used to apply the function to a list. So for which, let's see an example. Suppose here we have a list of numbers 3, 4, 5 and 6 and we want to return the square of a number. So to apply the square function to each one of the elements of the list, we will use the map function. So for which, let's say we will write our function as result equal to map bracket. Now over here in map, there are two things. Here is firstly our function and then comma, second thing which we will write is our list. So our list is numbers. However, our function is going to be lambda function, which will return the square of each element in the list. So for which I will write lambda x, and then it will return us x square. Here each number will be passed one by one and then the square will be returned. To see the output, we will write list result and then see every number has been squared over here. Using map function, lambda functions can also take multiple inputs. Suppose here we have got two lists and we want to return the product of corresponding elements. Let's see how we do it. So for which I will again write result map. Now over here I am going to write my lambda function as lambda x comma y and then return x multiplied by y. Now instead of one list, because my lambda function is taking two elements, I'll provide both the lists over here. So I'll write list 1 comma list 2. And now if we write our list bracket result, we can see 1 has been multiplied by 10, 2 has been multiplied by 20, that's why we are getting 40. 3 has been multiplied by 30, that's why we are getting 90, and 4 has been multiplied by 40, that's why we are getting 160. Just like map functions, lambda functions can also be used with reduce. Let's firstly import the reduce function. So over here from functools import reduce, we are importing our reduce function. And now let's say we have a list of numbers. Now what does this reduce function do? A reduce function is used to, let's say, calculate cumulative sum or cumulative product. So it will take each one of these numbers, let's say these two numbers, it will add it up, then it will add 30 and then it will add it up and so on. So to use reduce function, I will write reduce. Now here I will provide my lambda function as my sum function. So I can write it as lambda x comma y and then it will return us x plus y. And for reduce, I am passing it my list over here. So see, it has returned us 100. Here we have written x comma y, but notice we are only passing it one list, because with reduce function, the function written inside it is applied iteratively to each one of its elements. That's why we are not giving it two lists, we are giving it only one list. Unlike map function, where in map function, if the UDF is expecting two inputs, then we will write two lists. Just like map and reduce, lambda functions can also be used with filter expressions. So let's take an example. Suppose here we have a list of salaries and we want to return only those salaries which are more than or equal to 3500. So for which, let's write a filter expression, and here we will write our lambda expression. A lambda expression will take the input as x, which will be each and every single element of the list, and it will return a true or false value. So if x is more than equal to 3500, then our expression will get a value like true, but if it is not more than 3500, then it will get a value like false. And here I will write our list. But what filter expression eventually does, it only returns those elements who have a true corresponding to it. So example, let's write it like list and over here. So we can see it is returning only 4000 and this 7600, because for this number here true was there and for this number false was there. So that was all about lambda functions in Python. Do let us know in the comments below how did you find this video, and stay tuned for upcoming content. Until then, see you soon.